Karibu kwenye chaneli yangu ya YouTube. Kenya and Rwanda decided to join the Gambia, the Seychelles, and Benin, the most amazing beaches, crystal clear waters. Lonely Planet actually named Nairobi, Kenya, as the number one place to visit for 2024. Akwaba, Karibu, and welcome to Talking Drums Thursdays. And Karibu kwenye chaneli yangu ya YouTube. I have been practicing, so please, my Kenyans, my Tanzanians, my East Africans, let me know how I did in the comments below. So, welcome back to another episode. This may have given it away, and also this amazing necklace that I'm wearing that I actually sourced from the country we're about to talk about. But today's topic is about tourism and what other countries in Africa can learn from Kenya. I've been really blessed to have been to Kenya twice and counting. It's an amazing country, so diverse. You've got the hustle and bustle of Nairobi, you've got the tech scene of Nairobi, you've got the cuisine, you've got the music. You also have the incredible East Coast, the most amazing beaches, crystal clear waters. And all over the country, you have nature galore, home to some of the most amazing national parks, such as the Masai Mara, which most people know, but Amboseli National Park, my personal favorite at the moment, but many others that I'm looking to explore further. And you also have the diverse culture, the diverse languages, diverse tribes. There's just so much to see and do in one country. So to be honest, I'm not surprised that Kenya has been recognized internationally for its travel and tourism successes, to the extent that this year, Lonely Planet actually named Nairobi, Kenya, as the number one place to visit for 2024. This is major for so many reasons. One of the main ones being that Nairobi, Kenya even beat the number one travel destination in the world, Paris, France. That's right, Paris, France receives the most visitors in the world every year. And so for Nairobi, Kenya to be recommended over Paris, France, you're doing something right. That recognition is exciting news for Nairobi, for Kenya as a whole, and for the whole continent of Africa, which is why we're here today. So I thought about a few reasons as to why Lonely Planet would recognize Nairobi in such a way. And to be honest, there are so many reasons. But I think some of the main ones include the fact that there is just so much to offer in the capital. So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, you have a vibrant tech scene, you have an amazing musical scene, you have an amazing cultural scene, but also an amazing natural scene as well. So, Nairobi is the only city in the world to have a national park. That's correct. So, you can actually go on safari in the middle of the city. The culinary scene is amazing. Oh my goodness, the food is absolutely amazing, and there's so many cuisines you can explore, from Kenyan cuisine and beyond. Nairobi is a gateway to the whole country, as most capitals are, but it's really easily accessible to some of the major tourism destinations we know of. As I mentioned earlier, the Masai Mara and Amboseli National Park, which gives you some of the most amazing views of Mount Kilimanjaro anywhere in the world, as well as some lesser known parks like Samburu, which I cannot wait to visit, and Old Peheta. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's also a gateway for travel across Africa, with Kenya Airways providing flights to about 30 destinations across the continent. And I know personally, I've used Kenya Airways for a few trips across the continent, including to the Seychelles, which was amazing. And the country makes travel easily accessible. For example, up until recently, you could easily apply for an e-visa online that would be approved online, and you'd present that to the immigration official when you arrived in the country. But as of recent times, there have been a few major announcements. So I think there was a lot of happiness and jubilation when Kenya was one of a handful of countries that announced that they were going to be visa free for African countries. This was fantastic. Sometimes it can be harder for Africans to visit other African countries than from people outside of the continent. This doesn't make any sense. And so I was so happy to see Kenya, alongside Rwanda, announce that it was going to be visa free for other African countries. Kenya and Rwanda decided to join the Gambia, the Seychelles, and Benin as the only countries in Africa that allow complete visa free access to all other countries across the continent. This was a fantastic announcement, and there was a lot of discussion around it. Celebratory discussion. There was a lot of celebratory discussion around this. But Kenya recently went a step further, and as part of its 60th Independence Day celebrations, announced that it was opening up Kenya to be visa free for the whole world. This is unprecedented. The whole world. So I'd love to know, what do you think about this? This was a step that a lot of people weren't anticipating. When I heard the news, I did take a step back to think what it would mean in terms of other things such as security or such as reciprocity. So for security, for example, visas provide an opportunity for a country to vet who is accessing. And so you would wonder, if someone is going visa free, could you still have that opportunity? The president explained that there will be an online database that will provide a visa waiver. So there's still a process in which your information will be collected before you can visit the country. In terms of reciprocity, I haven't seen much about that, but let's be real. Citizens from African countries pay thousands of pounds for applications for visas in order to access Europe or America, and they're not guaranteed entry. So if their application is rejected, they lose their money. So most countries usually have some kind of reciprocal arrangement whereby they'll both decide to be visa free for their citizens. So obviously in this case for Kenya, whereby the country is going to be visa free for every country in the world, what does that mean for Kenyan citizens' accessibility to other countries? Are we going to see a reciprocal arrangement, or is it going to be the same as it is now, whereby citizens will still have to pay a lot of money in order to visit countries outside of their own? It remains to be seen, but that's something that came to mind when I first heard the announcement. Kenya has also been investing heavily in its MICE tourism, that is meetings, incentives, conferences and events, and recently hosted the Africa Climate Summit, which saw thousands of delegates from across the continent and beyond descend on Nairobi to attend this crucial meeting around climate and its impact across the continent. So I think we'll be seeing more of this, and next year Kenya will be hosting the annual African Development Bank meetings. So I think we can see here a concerted effort to invest in MICE tourism, and we'll see that continue to grow. With MICE tourism, I think it's a good gateway into showing investors what opportunities there are. So beyond their conferences, it provides them an opportunity to explore a country as a tourist, but also as a potential investor. And what some of you may notice when you travel across Kenya is that there's a tiered pricing system, whereby there is one price for Kenyans or East African citizens and another price for non-Kenyans and East African citizens. And I think the importance of that is to ensure that Kenyan people are able to enjoy their tourism sites as much as people who come into the country to enjoy it. So ultimately it's about accessibility. So what can other countries learn from Kenya? I would say consider a tiered pricing system so that it makes your tourism sites accessible to your citizens, because your citizens act as ambassadors for your country. So if they're able to visit places, they can then share by word of mouth, or once they travel outside of the country, everything that your country has to offer. They can't do that if they haven't had the opportunity to visit these places themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, a country is a custodian of a tourism site or national park and so forth. So citizens should be able to enjoy it just as much as people who have visited from overseas. Investment in infrastructure. This develops the country's infrastructure and makes it accessible both to citizens and to travelers. This means that you can decentralize a location, but also ensure that you decentralize the funds that a location may generate. For example, if your tourism is only focused on your capital city, you shouldn't be surprised if there's an influx of travelers and an influx of people looking for job or investment opportunities. However, if you invest in your infrastructure and make other parts of your country more accessible, you will see an uptick of tourism and also individuals from across the country also visiting those places, setting up businesses in those places, living in those places, and you'll start to decentralize some of the areas that may be congested or have a large concentration of visitors or citizens. Freedom of movement for Africans to each other's countries. We are one continent. It does not make sense that it is harder for African citizens to visit their neighbours and other countries across the continent than it is for citizens overseas, outside of the continent. That doesn't make any sense. It can sometimes be easier to move around Africa on a European or North American passport than it can be to move around on an African passport. We've seen a slow wind of change, and there are now 5 countries who have opened up their countries to be visa-free for all African countries. We need to see more of this. Maintenance of natural and historical sites. As I mentioned earlier, countries are essentially custodians of these sites, and so it's also their duty to look after them. And lastly, promotion of the country, its culture, its music, its cuisine, and everything that makes it unique. This is just a handful of things that Kenya is doing to enhance its tourism offering that I think other countries can learn from and easily apply. Is there anything else you think? Please leave a comment in the comment box below. Let's discuss, and see you next week.